What's up, Merc Nation? I want to just say thank you again for coming and listening to the podcast episode today. Before we really get into it, I want to just thank everyone for continuing to make this podcast what it is. We hit 30 countries. If you haven't followed me on Instagram, that would be amazing. I'm trying to grow that feed because I know that that hits a lot of people in different countries. So that's awesome. But, I'm really glad that you're here. And before we start, I want you to just take a breath, okay? I want you to just inhale right now and then exhale because this conversation is going to be a little bit of a heavy one. And not in a hopeless way, but in a real way. Because today we're talking about addiction, not just addiction itself, but what it's like to love someone who's struggling with it. What it does to you, what it takes from you, and how somehow you're supposed to care about them without losing yourself in the process. And if that already seems familiar to you and common ground, then this episode might be for you. I wanted to start this podcast with a little bit of a story, and we're going to use a fictitious name, but it's the story that we're taking the pieces from. Okay, her name isn't actually Sarah, but we're going to call her Sarah, okay? Sarah met him when things were easy, before the late night calls, before the excuses, before the silence. Back then, he was present, funny, thoughtful, the kind of person who remembered little things, like how she took her coffee, or the fact that she always got nervous before meetings. And one night early on, she asked him, "Hey, do you ever drink?" And he kind of laughed and said, "Yeah, sometimes, nothing crazy." But she didn't think much of it, because at that point, why would she? Everything felt normal, safe, good. But over time, things shifted. Not all at once. That's the thing about addiction. It doesn't usually arrive like a storm, right? It creeps in slowly when you least expect it, quietly. At first, it was small things. He'd cancel plans, say he was tired or had a long day. And she'd say, "Hey, it's okay. We can hang out another time. No big deal." Then it became more frequent. And one night she called him. He picked up, but something felt off. His voice was slower, unsteady. And she paused and said, "Hey, are you okay?" And there was a silence. Then he said, "Hey, yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." And she knew. She didn't have proof, but she knew. And that's where it starts for a lot of people. That moment where something doesn't feel right, but you're not ready to fully face it yet. So instead, you tell yourself the softer version of the truth. Sarah started noticing these patterns. She also noticed something else, the good moments, because they were still there and they mattered. There were nights where he was completely himself, present, warm, engaged. And in those moments, she'd think, "See, it's okay. It's not that bad." One night they were sitting on the couch and she finally said it. "Hey, can I ask you something?" And he looked at her and said, "Hey, what's up?" And she hesitated and then said, "I feel like sometimes you're not really here." And he got quiet. And then he said, "I've just been stressed. It's nothing." And she nodded because part of her wanted to believe that. Actually, most of her did because the alternative was harder. The alternative meant accepting that something bigger was going on. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. So instead, she tried to help. She'd say things like, "Maybe you should take a break," or "We could do something different this weekend," or even, "I'm here for you. You know that, right?" And he'd always respond the same: "I know. I've got it under control." And for a while, she believed him, or at least she wanted to. This is where things started to shift, not just for him, but for her. because now she's aware. And once you're aware, you start trying to do something about it. She started thinking maybe if I'm more supportive, he'll stop. Maybe if I don't push too hard, he won't pull away. Maybe if I say this is the right way, it's finally going to click with him. So she adjusted herself, her words, her tone, her reactions. One night, things escalated. He didn't show up. No call, no text, no nothing. And when he finally responded the next day, she said, "Where were you? I was worried." And he replied, "You're overreacting. I told you I was busy." And something in her dropped because now it wasn't just about the behavior, it was about how it was being handled. And she sat there staring at her phone thinking, am I overreacting? That question, it shows up a lot and it's dangerous because it slowly pulls you away from your own reality, from your own instincts, from your own truth. And the more it happens, the more you start doubting yourself instead of trusting what you feel. You start minimizing it, explaining it away, justifying it even, because it's easier than facing what's really happening. And at some point, without even realizing it, Sarah's life started to revolve around his choices. She stopped focusing on her own needs. She stopped asking herself what she wanted because everything became more managing the situation, managing him, managing the relationship. And one night she sat alone in her apartment, phone in her hand, waiting. And she had this thought, I don't feel like myself anymore. And at that moment, that's a turning point because it forces a question, a hard one. How much of myself have I given away trying to hold this together? And here's the truth, you cannot fix someone else's addiction. You can love them, you can support them, but you cannot do the work for them. And trying to will cost you pieces of yourself, slowly, quietly, until one day you look up and think, when did I become this version of me? Now, eventually, Sarah had another conversation with him, and this one was different. She said, I care about you a lot, but this isn't working for me anymore. And of course, he got defensive. So what, you're just going to leave? And she paused and took a breath and said, I'm not leaving you. I'm just not going to keep pretending this is okay. That's what a boundary sounds like. It's not yelling, it's not punishment, it's clarity for the other person. She continued, I won't be around you when you're drinking like this, and I'm not going to cover for you anymore. Wow, so you're judging me now? And she shook her head. No, I'm protecting myself. That's the difference. And it's not easy because when you set boundaries, people push back hard, especially when they're used to you not having them. But boundaries are not about controlling someone else. They're about deciding what you will and won't accept in your life. She didn't stop caring. That's important. She still checked in, still said, I hope you get help. I really do. But she stopped trying to carry him, stopped trying to solve the problem, stopped making his choices her responsibility. And that shift, it changed everything. Not him necessarily, but her. She started feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Not perfect peace, but enough to breathe again. And in some cases, this is where the story ends, not with everything magically fixed, not with a perfect recovery, but with a decision to step back to choose yourself even when it hurts, even when you still care. Because sometimes loving someone means accepting that you cannot save them and choosing not to lose yourself trying. Loving someone through addiction is one of the most painful, confusing, and exhausting experiences a person can actually go through. Because on one hand, you care about them deeply, You want them to be okay. You want them to heal. But on the other hand, you're hurting. You're getting drained. You're starting to lose pieces of yourself. A lot of people think addiction is just about bad choices or a lack of discipline or not trying hard enough. But addiction is not that simple. Addiction changes your brain. It affects how people experience reward, how they handle their stress, how they make decisions. Over time, the thing they're using, whether it's alcohol, drugs, gambling, food, or something else, stops being about enjoyment and it becomes about relief. Relief from pain, relief from anxiety, relief from trauma. It's a relief from the feeling that they're not good enough. And eventually, it can feel like survival, even when it's destroying them, even when it's hurting the people around them. Maybe you're one of those people. It can be even when they know it's a problem. And that's the part that's hard to understand from the outside because you're looking at it thinking, why don't they just stop? But for them, it doesn't feel like something they can just turn off. Now, that doesn't excuse their harmful behavior, obviously, but it doesn't mean you have to accept everything they do. But it does help explain why this is so complicated. Addiction is not just a habit, it's a cycle of pain, escape, temporary relief, and then more pain. And if you're someone who loves a person caught in that cycle, you're feeling it too. Maybe not in the same way, but you're feeling the impact of it every single day. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough about addiction. Addiction is never just one person's problem, right? It spreads. It affects partners, parents, children, friends, anyone who cares about that person. Because when someone is struggling with addiction, it changes the relationship. Trust can get shaky, plans fall through, promises tend to get broken. And a big one, communication really becomes strained or can really disappear completely. And over time, you might start to feel like you're walking on eggshells with this person, like you have to monitor their mood or their behavior or their choices that they're making just to keep things from falling apart in front of you. That is extremely exhausting. And it can also feel deeply confusing because there are moments where they seem like themselves again. And it's great, and you feel great, and they feel great. Moments where they're kind, where they're present, where they're loving, and you think, they're there. That's the person I know. And you hold on to that and you pocket it. You cling to it with white knuckles because it gives you hope. But then the cycle comes back and you're right back in the pain. And somewhere in all of that, you might start questioning yourself again. Am I overreacting? Am I being too hard on them? Am I not doing enough? The line is always a trap when you don't feel like you're enough for any circumstance. One of the most common things that happens when you love someone with addiction is you start trying to fix things. You try to say the right thing, you do the right thing, you create the right environment, you try to make sure that they're comfortable. You're supportive enough, you're patient. You might think to yourself, if I just love them the right way, they'll get better. There's hope, and that belief comes from a good place. It comes from love. You care about this person. You want them to be better. You don't want them to struggle. But it can also be a trap because slowly, without even realizing it, your life starts revolving around their behavior. Their choices start determining your mood. Their stability determines your peace, and you start carrying something that was never yours to carry, their recovery. And I want to say something that might be hard to hear, but it's important. You cannot fix someone else's addictions. You can support them, you can encourage them, you can care about them deeply, but you cannot do the work for them. They have to be the one that makes the move. And trying to do this will drain you emotionally, mentally, physically, until one day you wake up and realize you don't like yourself anymore. That's not love, that's loss, and it's not sustainable. Now, we're going to talk about something that is absolutely essential, and that's protecting yourself because it is where a lot of people struggle. You want to be there for them absolutely 100%, but you also need to be there for yourself. And those two things can feel like conflict, but they're not. They only feel that way because you've been taught that caring about someone means sacrificing yourself. It doesn't. Let's break it down, okay? First, one big thing is boundaries. Boundaries are not punishment, they're there to protect you. They are a way of saying, I care about you, but I also care about myself. Boundaries might look like, I won't be around when you're using. I'm not going to give you money that supports this. Or maybe I'm not going to lie for you and cover for you. And yes, this might be upsetting, but they might push back and they might try to make you feel guilty. But boundaries are not about controlling them, they're about protecting you. Second, enabling. This is a tough one because sometimes we feel like helping is actually making it easier for the addiction to continue, giving them money, making excuses, cleaning up the consequences. It comes from love, absolutely, but it can keep the cycle going, unfortunately. And that doesn't help them, and it doesn't help you either. Another one is emotional detachment. Now, this doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop letting their chaos control your internal state, right? It means you can say, I love you, but I'm not going to let this destroy me. And a big one, taking care of yourself. This again is not selfish, but it is necessary. You also need support, whether that's therapy, friends, support groups, or just time to breathe and process and try to figure things out. You deserve that peace. Even if they're struggling, you deserve stability, even if their life is unstable, and you are allowed to choose yourself without that guilt. So, what does healthy support actually look like? Because it's not about walking away from caring, it's about changing how you show up for them. Healthy support means listening to them, be active listening, be present with them without trying to fix everything. It means encouraging them to seek real help from professionals. It's not your duty. There are people that will help them the way that they need to be helped, and they can be helped all the time. That's why we have professionals to do that. There's programs from people who are equipped to guide them. It means being honest, no sugarcoating things, not pretending everything is okay when it's not. And it means letting go of that control, letting go of the idea that you can manage their outcome because you can't. But that's not failure. That's just the reality of things. You can absolutely stand beside someone without carrying them. You can absolutely love someone without losing yourself. But when is it time to take a step back? Of course, that's one of the hardest parts. Whereas there's no real sign that tells you to do it, it's kind of a feeling, knowing when to step back, because sometimes love makes you want to stay no matter what, but there are moments when staying starts to cost you too much. If your safety is at risk, if your mental health is breaking down, if your boundaries are constantly being ignored, might be time to create that distance. And that, again, does not mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're giving up on them. It means you're choosing to protect yourself, and that matters. You are not abandoning them. You are choosing to survive, and sometimes that is the most loving and honest decision you can make. Now, before I end all this, I want you to hear this, okay? You can love someone deeply and still choose yourself. You can want the best for them without sacrificing your well-being, and you can hope for their healing without making it your responsibility. Addiction is powerful and very serious, but so are you. Your clarity, your boundaries, your ability to take care of yourself, that matters too. You are allowed to have peace and step back and protect your heart. And if no one has told you this lately, I'll tell you, you are not alone in what you're going through. You need to take care of yourself and be gentle with yourself. Remember, you are not wrong for caring for this person. There's still love there, but they also have to do this for them. Now, as I start to close this conversation, just remember loving someone who is struggling with addictions is not a small thing. It is a very serious matter. It takes patience, it takes empathy, it takes a kind of strength that most people don't see. And love on its own is not enough to change someone. You can see their potential, you can believe in who they could become. You can hold on to every good moment, every glimpse of that person you know is still in there. And at some point, they have to choose that for themselves as well. They have to show it, not just in words, but in actions, in effort, in consistency. Because a healthy relationship can't be built on hope alone. It has to be built on reality. And that doesn't mean you stop caring, doesn't mean you stop loving them at all. Doesn't mean you stop hoping they find their way. It just means you stop abandoning yourself in the process. You get to have boundaries. You get to protect your peace. You get to choose a life that feels stable and safe and whole. And if they rise, if they do the work, if they meet you in that space, then that's something real you can build on. But if they don't, that is not your failure. That is not something you are supposed to fix. So take a breath, let go of the responsibility that was never yours to carry, and remind yourself you can love someone and still choose yourself. You can wish them the best and still walk your own path, and you can hold that compassion for them without sacrificing your own well-being. I don't want anybody to ever struggle with addiction. I don't want anybody to struggle ever with any mental health issues, but it's tough. And at the end of the day, that individual has to choose themselves. They have to want it. They want to be the best version of themselves. It comes from them. You can encourage them all the time, but in the end, they're the ones that has to choose. And I hope they choose wisely because everybody deserves a chance to become the person they're supposed to be. Everyone has a purpose, but addiction alters that. Just remember, though, in the end, you have to take care of yourself because if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of anybody else. Remember that. All right, Merc Nation, as I close this out, I just want to say thank you again for continuing to listen to the Merc Method. And we're going to just double this 30 countries up, get to 60. That's the next goal. All right. Can't do it without you guys listening. So I appreciate all of you, of course, as always. Love you guys. Hope you take care of yourself. And, again, we'll talk soon. So as I leave you always, I leave you with this. Stay grounded. Stay kind to yourself. And remember, strength begins with honesty. Until next time.